7 straight Champions League knockout games with a goal or an assist. A streak that did not exist as a record in the history of the competition until yesterday. For 2 decades, Messi and Ronaldo had owned almost every Champions League record. But on this night, it changed. So who is Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, and why is he going to be a Ballon d'Or contender in the future? Tbilisi, Georgia, working class district, a grey, concrete Soviet-era apartment block that looks exactly like every other grey, concrete Soviet-era apartment block on the street. There is nothing special about it. There is nothing special about the neighbourhood, and nothing about this building whispers, somewhere inside this stack of concrete, a future Champions League hero is currently being raised. And yet, that building was home to Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, born February 12, 2001. Son of a country that had spent most of its modern history being told what to do by larger neighbours. A country whose football tradition was deep, but whose stage was small. Georgian players did not lift Champions League trophies. Georgian players did not get compared to Maradona. Georgian players, in the politest possible terms, were not supposed to be the story. Khvicha did not know any of this yet. He was 7 years old. He was kicking a ball around a courtyard with kids from the building. He was, by every account, just a slightly skinny boy with very fast feet and very big dreams. Then, 2008 happened. The Russo-Georgian War. South Ossetia, tanks, bombs, Russian forces pushing into Georgia, a conflict that lasted only a few days but rearranged the map of the country and the psyche of every child living through it. Khvicha could hear the explosions from his neighbourhood. He could hear the news on television. He could see what fear looked like on the faces of adults who were not supposed to be afraid of anything. Most kids would have been traumatised. Khvicha, in his own quiet way, made a decision. He decided football was his way out. Not the abstract motivational poster version of football as a way out. The literal one. The one where, if you get good enough, fast enough, the ball takes you somewhere quieter than this. Somewhere where the only thing exploding is the noise of a stadium. Football. So he practiced. And became too good. Too good for the local courtyards. Good enough to be noticed by scouts from Georgia's biggest club. Dinamo Tbilisi came calling. The boy from the apartment block was about to walk into a real academy. This, his family must have thought, was the start of something. Dinamo. They were right, just not in the way they expected. Dinamo Tbilisi is the biggest club in Georgia. Historically, culturally, financially, however you want to measure it. If you are a Georgian kid with talent, this is where you go. This is where you are supposed to be discovered. This is the front door to a real career. Khvicha walked through that door at 16 years old. On September 29th, 2017, he made his senior debut as a substitute against Kolkati 1913. He came on in the 62nd minute in a 1-1 draw. In total, he played 5 matches for Dinamo Tbilisi. 5. That's not a misprint. Across his entire run at the club that was supposed to launch his career, he accumulated barely 200 minutes of senior football. He scored once against Shukura Kobalati, and then, in March 2018, the club essentially looked at this 17-year-old and said, "You know what? We do not really see it. You should probably go find another team. Let that information settle for a moment." The club that should have been protecting their teenage prodigy with both hands looked at Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, future Serie A most valuable player, future Champions League winner, and decided he was not worth the contract dispute. It was, on paper, a contract dispute. In practice, it was a polite invitation to leave. A teammate from those Dinamo days later admitted that yes, the kid showed flashes, but he did not really generate danger. He looked like just another decent player. Khvicha left. He signed for FC Rustavi, a smaller club, a step down on every chart that measures Georgian football. For a teenager who had just been told his hometown giant did not believe in him, this was a quietly devastating moment. He went to Rustavi. He worked. In 2018, The Guardian noticed him and named him one of the 60 best young players in the world. Bayern Munich, of all clubs, sent scouts to watch him. He even attended a Bayern Champions League match in person as a teenager, sitting in the stands, while the club that had rejected him went about its business in Tbilisi as if nothing had happened. And in that moment, somewhere in the universe, a script was being written. The kind of script where the kid Bayern once watched would, 8 years later, score twice against them in a Champions League semi-final. But we will get to Munich. We have to go through Moscow first. Moscow, as anyone who has ever tried to do anything in Moscow can tell you, is not a city that hands out favours easily. Early 2019, Lokomotiv Moscow, one of the giants of the Russian Premier League, had been watching this Georgian kid at Rustavi. They liked what they saw enough to bring him in on loan. 18 years old, a loan move to a top-flight foreign club. By any measure, this was a step up. And then he played 7 league games. 7. 6 months in Moscow and he played 7 matches. He did not impress enough to stay. He did not make Lokomotiv's case for a permanent deal. He returned, in football terms, like a borrowed library book. Slightly used, no fines. Please return to the front desk. Back-to-back rejections. Tbilisi let him go. Lokomotiv let him go. And a kid with less iron in his bones might have started believing what the world kept implying. That maybe he was not quite as special as he thought. But Kvicha was the kid who had grown up listening to bombs. Failing to break into Lokomotiv's first team, in the grand scheme of his life, ranked somewhere below mildly annoying. He moved on. In mid-2019, he signed with Rubin Kazan. Different Russian club, different city, different chance. And this is where something started to click. At Rubin, he finally got minutes. Real, consistent, week-in, week-out minutes. He started to play with the confidence of a footballer who knew the manager was not going to bench him after one bad pass. He won back-to-back Russian Premier League Best Young Player awards for the 2019 to 2020 season and the 2020 to 2021 season. He started to look, finally, like the player he was supposed to be. The whispers started. European scouts began murmuring about a Georgian winger in Russia who was doing things that did not fit the league. He had ideas defenders could not read. He had a right foot that bent shots like the laws of physics owed him a favour. Word was spreading. Then, in February 2022, the world shifted. Russia invaded Ukraine. For most of Europe, this was a geopolitical earthquake. For Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, it was something more personal. He was a Georgian footballer in Russia, watching the same flag that had rolled tanks into his own country in 2008, do it again to a neighbour. He was a kid who had heard those bombs once. Now he was being asked, in effect, to keep playing football as if nothing was happening. FIFA, in a rare moment of useful intervention, announced that foreign players in Russia could suspend their contracts and walk. Kvicha walked. He left Rubin Kazan in the middle of his career's biggest upward curve. He left a higher level league. He left the income. He left the platform. He went home. He signed a short-term deal with Dinamo Batumi in the Georgian top flight for what was essentially a holding pattern. To outsiders, this looked like a disaster. The Georgian kid who had finally cracked Russia was now playing in front of a crowd smaller than some Russian club training sessions. To Kvicha, it was the only decision that made sense. He was, as he later put it, finally out of the grey world. He was home. He played 10 matches for Batumi. He scored. He assisted. He, in the words of one report, did something in almost every game, and the European scouts who had been peeking at him in Russia now had something far more uncomfortable to think about. This kid had just walked away from a professional contract on principle and he was somehow getting better. Arsenal sent people. Fenerbahce sent people. Half of Europe's mid-table started calling. And then, in the summer of 2022, the right phone call came. From a city that knew a thing or two about saints, sinners and number 10. Naples was on the line. Napoli signed Khvicha Kvaratskhelia in July 2022 for a fee somewhere between 10 and 12 million euros. In modern football, this is what you pay for a backup right-back. Napoli were getting a left winger they expected to start. There was a problem. The man whose shirt he was inheriting was Lorenzo Insigne, local boy, captain, hero, genuine Neapolitan, born in the city, raised in the city, idol of the city. Insigne had just left for Toronto Football Club, and the entire region was in a slow, gentle state of mourning. And now Napoli were handing the left wing to some 21-year-old Georgian nobody had heard of. The local press was sceptical. The fans were polite, but sceptical. The coach, Luciano Spalletti, kept telling everyone to wait and see. Wait and see is, generally speaking, what coaches say when they know something the public does not. On the first match day of Serie A, on August 15th, 2022, against Hellas Verona, Khvicha scored and assisted in a 5-2 win. A week later, he scored twice against Monza. He topped the Serie A scoring charts after 2 games, becoming the first player in Napoli history to score 3 goals in the opening 2 league matches. Naples, a city that does not believe in anything until it sees it, started to believe. By October, the Italian press had given him the nickname Cavaradona, a pun, yes, on his actual name, and also a comparison to the only football god Naples has ever truly worshipped: Diego Armando Maradona, the man whose murals still cover the city, the man whose number 10 Napoli retired forever. Comparing a 21-year-old to Maradona in Naples is the kind of thing that ends careers if you are wrong. They were not wrong. Khvicha finished the 2022-2023 season with 14 goals and 17 assists in 43 matches. He was named Serie A's most valuable player. He was named Champions League Young Player of the Season. He led Napoli to the Champions League quarter-finals for the first time in the club's entire history. And then he led them to something the city had not seen in 33 years: a Scudetto. Napoli's first Italian league title since 1990, since Maradona himself, the man whose ghost still drifted through every alley in the Spanish Quarter, the kid from Tbilisi, the one Dinamo had let walk for free, the one Lokomotiv could not find 7 games for, had just helped end one of the longest droughts in European football. And he had done it while wearing the shirt of a local legend in a city that does not forgive failure. Murals appeared on the walls of Naples. Khvicha's face, alongside Victor Osimhen's, painted onto the same neighbourhoods that still carried Maradona. The president of Napoli started talking about building the next decade of the club around him. There were Ballon d'Or whispers. And there was, also, a very small problem. A problem that, in the world of elite football, never stays small for long. His contract. When Khvicha signed for Napoli in 2022, he was, for all practical purposes, a Russian Premier League refugee with potential. The contract reflected that. He was earning, by reports, around 1.5 million euros a year. For a Serie A starter, this was modest. For a Serie A most valuable player, this was a punchline. By late 2024, every major club in Europe knew it, and more importantly, so did his agent. The negotiations with Napoli dragged. Renewals were proposed. Renewals were rejected. The numbers Napoli were willing to pay did not match the numbers his representatives were willing to accept. And in the background, a bigger machine was warming up. Paris Saint-Germain, Qatari ownership, decade-long obsession with winning a Champions League trophy that they had spent something like $1 billion chasing without ever lifting. They had tried Messi, they had tried Neymar, they had tried Mbappe. None of them had delivered the trophy. And now, in the winter of 2024 to 2025, they were rebuilding around a coach named Luis Enrique and a vision of a team rather than a cast of solo stars. They needed an X factor on the left wing. They thought they knew exactly where to find one. PSG made their move. Napoli resisted. Their president, Aurelio De Laurentiis, would later admit, in his typical theatrical way, that he was essentially forced into the sale. The agent, he claimed, had threatened to invoke FIFA Article 17, a clause deep in the labyrinth of football's regulations that allows a player to unilaterally terminate his contract under certain conditions. Use it correctly, and a club can lose a player for a calculated fee instead of a market value transfer fee. Article 17 is a pistol. It almost never gets fired in big cases because the legal warfare is brutal, but threatening to fire it is enough to focus minds. De Laurentiis claims that's exactly what happened. The agent wanted his client on a double-digit million salary. The agent, of course, also wanted his commission. Napoli, faced with the choice of selling now for around 70 million euros plus add-ons or risking a war they might lose, sold. On January 17th, 2025, PSG officially announced the signing. The contract runs until 2029. Salary, by reports, jumped from 1.5 million euros a year at Napoli to around 10 million in Paris. And to leave no doubt about the intention, PSG handed him the number 7 shirt, the shirt Kylian Mbappe had just vacated. Antonio Conte, who had become Napoli's manager, was visibly heartbroken. He admitted, in the press, that Kvicha had asked to leave. He admitted he had not been able to convince him to stay. He said, "I don't want to keep anyone with chains," in the tired voice of a man who had tried. Naples cried, Kvicha cried, the mural stayed on the walls, and the kid who had once been told to find another club by Dinamo Tbilisi flew to Paris to wear a number 7 shirt that until very recently had belonged to one of the most famous footballers on the planet. He had somehow been told to find another club twice in his career. The first time it nearly broke him. The second time it cost a Qatari sovereign wealth fund 70 million euros and a famous shirt number. Careful what you ask for. He had asked for a chance to prove himself all those years ago in Tbilisi. The universe, it turned out, had been taking notes. There is a particular kind of pressure that comes with arriving at Paris Saint-Germain. It is the pressure of expensive failure. For over a decade, Qatar Sports Investments had been pouring oil money into the Parc des Princes, signing some of the biggest names in football and watching helplessly as the Champions League trophy refused to come. Mbappe had failed, Messi had failed, Neymar had failed. The trophy had become, in Parisian football folklore, a kind of curse. Paris Saint-Germain had even started to be nicknamed cursed in some corners of the European press, which is exactly the sort of phrase that haunts a dressing room. Kvicha arrived in this room in January 2025, mid-season, with Luis Enrique, fresh off his Spain and Barcelona reinventions, building something different, something less reliant on individual genius, something more like a machine. On January 25th, Kvicha made his debut, a one-apiece draw against Reims. He provided the assist for the opening goal, of course, because what else would he do in his first match? On February 7th, he scored his first goal for Paris Saint-Germain in a 4-1 win over Monaco. On February 19th, he scored his first Champions League goal for the club in a 7-0 demolition of Brest. On April 5th, Paris Saint-Germain sealed the Ligue 1 title. Kvicha became the first Georgian to win the French league. On May 24th, Paris Saint-Germain won the Coupe de France. He missed the final with a headache of all things, but he became the first Georgian to win that too. And then Munich, Allianz Arena, June 1st, 2025. Champions League final, Paris Saint-Germain against Inter Milan, the match the club had been chasing for over a decade. Paris Saint-Germain won 5-0, the biggest victory in Champions League final history. A scoreline that did not even pretend to be a competition. Goals from Achraf Hakimi, Desire Do Again, Kvicha and Seni Mayulu. In the 73rd minute, Kvicha scored Paris Saint-Germain's 4th, becoming the first Georgian player ever to score in a European Cup final. Only the second Georgian to win the Champions League after the legendary Kaka Kaladze. The curse lifted, the trophy came home, and the kid who had grown up in a Soviet apartment block in Tbilisi was somehow hugging the Big Ears trophy in Munich while confetti buried the pitch like a celebration that had been delayed by a decade. He had been a Paris Saint-Germain player for less than 5 months. He had won a domestic and continental treble in his first half season. There was no precedent for this. There was barely a vocabulary for this. And yet, when you look at it now, in retrospect, this was just the warm-up. The 2025 to 2026 Champions League campaign began with PSG defending their title, a position the club had, until recently, found psychologically difficult to occupy. Luis Enrique had kept the structure. Kvicha was now established. The number 7 on his back no longer felt like an inheritance. It felt like ownership. PSG's group stage was solid, if not earth-shaking. The drama, as it always does in this competition, started in the knockouts. Round of 16, PSG drew Chelsea. The first leg was an easy one for PSG, 5-2 and 2 goals and 1 assist. PSG advanced 8-2 on aggregate. 3 goals from a winger in a knockout tie is the kind of thing that makes commentators reach for words like decisive, inevitable, untouchable. He was named man of the match in both legs. Quarter-finals, PSG drew Liverpool, a monstrous English side with a forward line that gives defenders nightmares. PSG won 4-0 on aggregate. Kvicha scored once, assisted once, and was, again, named man of the match. Liverpool, whose own midfield had been picked apart by Luis Enrique's structure, did not have an answer. Semi-finals, PSG drew Bayern Munich. The same Bayern who had once watched a teenage Kvicha play in Tbilisi and decided, perhaps unwisely, not to sign him. First leg, April 28, 2026, Parc des Princes. PSG won 5-4 in a 9-goal thriller. Kvicha scored twice. The first was a one-on-one against Josip Stanisic, where he slowed the world down and bent the ball into the far corner. The second was a controlled finish from Hakimi's cutback at speed. The kind of finish that tells you a player is no longer thinking about the moment, only conducting it. Second leg, May 6th, 2026, Allianz Arena. Bayern needed only to manage the match. They started by attacking it. 2 minutes in, Kvicha collected the ball near midfield, played a one-touch pass to Fabian Ruiz, sprinted to the end line, and crossed for Ousmane Dembele to finish. PSG were ahead, and with that single assist, the record became official. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia became the first player in the history of the UEFA Champions League to score or assist in 7 consecutive knockout stage matches in a single campaign. Not Cristiano Ronaldo, not Lionel Messi. Ronaldo's best run was 5 matches. Messi's best run was fewer. The record, before Kvicha, did not exist as a record, because no one had ever stretched the streak this far. The numbers behind the streak are almost rude. Across this Champions League campaign, Kvicha has produced 10 goals and 5 assists in 14 appearances, and by the time the semi-final second leg ended, 10 goals and 6 assists in 15. A PSG club record for goal involvements in a single Champions League season, surpassing Dembele's tally from the previous year. Only Kylian Mbappe, now playing somewhere else, has scored more in this season's competition. Luis Enrique, asked about Kvicha at a press conference, was at his most Enrique. A Brazilian journalist asked how much better Kvara could still become. Enrique replied, dryly, that Kvara is not Brazilian, but that he could change nationality. The room laughed. The point, however, landed. The man being compared to Brazilian wingers was a kid from a Soviet apartment block in Tbilisi. Kvicha himself, asked in a BBC interview earlier this year about how he handled the pressure, said something quieter than the moment deserved. He said he considered himself a simple person. He said he tried to stay grounded, to listen to his family, to remember who he was and where he came from. Where he came from is a courtyard in Tbilisi where, as a 7-year-old, he heard bombs in the distance. Where he came from is a Dynamo Tbilisi academy that politely showed him the door. Where he came from is a Lokomotiv Moscow loan spell where he played 7 games and was deemed not enough. Where he came from is a Rubin Kazan dressing room he walked away from on principle when his country's neighbour invaded another country's neighbour. Where he came from is a list of doors closing behind him, each one, in retrospect, opening a slightly bigger one ahead. The Kvicha Kvaratskhelia who started his career and the Kvicha Kvaratskhelia who broke the Champions League knockout streak record are, in any meaningful sense, not the same player. The first one was a hopeful kid being told to find another team. The second one is the most decisive attacker in Europe, on a club, PSG, built specifically to be the most decisive team in Europe, and he is currently the missing piece they spent $1 billion failing to find. The Spanish press now openly debates whether he deserves the Ballon d'Or. The argument against, oddly enough, is not about form. It is that Georgia has not qualified for the World Cup, and Ballon d'Or voters love a World Cup. He may not win the trophy this year, he may not win it next year, but the conversation exists, which means the kid from the Soviet apartment block has officially entered the conversation about who is the best footballer alive. PSG hosts the second Champions League final of his career later this month. If they win it, he becomes a back-to-back European champion at 25. If they do not, he still leaves this season with the most goal involvements of any player in the competition, and a record neither Messi nor Ronaldo could touch. Either way, the story is no longer about whether Kvicha Kvaratskhelia was good enough. The story is about how many records he ends up breaking before he is done. About how many doors close behind him only to find, as ever, a slightly bigger one ahead. Dinamo Tbilisi told him to find another team. Lokomotiv Moscow could not find 7 matches for him. Now he cannot find a Champions League knockout where he does not score or assist. This is not the same Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, and the universe somewhere is still taking notes.